Okay, how about this bad boy? I'm not sure what that... Okay, Droid. Okay, Motorola Droid. Says no power. Okay. Yeah, I haven't used Motorola's for years, so I'm not sure if that's enough to identify the model number, but we'll write it like that. Okay, so let's see if there's no power. And I think that's correct. I don't see any power being drawn. Let's try to turn it on. Nope, nothing. Okay. Let's see if there's anything fishy with the connector again. Yeah, I don't like the looks of this connector either. That might be again the same issue. So it could be broken connector, so we'll see. But for now, no power, broken, and USB. It even has a screen protector on, nice. Okay. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today's episode we're going to be looking at another specimen, which is Motorola XT1254, also known as Droid Turbo. Okay. And the problem what we had with that was that there was no power, as in wherever it's on the battery, or if I plug it via micro USB connection, the phone looked completely dead. No signs of power draw, even never mind the screen or anything else there. It didn't draw any power, so that's a problem right there. And well, usually the first thing to contemplate in this case is the problem with the connector. And in this case, well, it looked good, so there was no obvious damage, at least what I could see. And usually in this case, what I do is just try to charge the battery externally. So open the case, pull the battery out, charge it externally, put it back in, and see if the phone works. Well, I tried that, and that did not work. And in retrospect, I'm actually not sure why, but it did not work. So phone looked completely dead. So I was not very optimistic about prospects of resuscitation here. However, I decided to push forward and see if there's anything else I can do. And unfortunately, I did most of this work off camera because I said I didn't hope to get much out of that. It turned out I was overly pessimistic on that one. Anyway, so let me bring you up to speed of what happened off the camera and where we're at right now. So as you can see, the phone is already in, well, somewhat disassembled state. So unfortunately, unlike most of the other devices in the eBay38 project, well, most other devices would have just a shell that you can just pop open, they just clamps. This one is more like modern smartphone devices, and the case was glued, so I had to, well, unglue it and basically cut the adhesive out. The problem with that is like they have a really weird back cover. Usually it's some kind of glass or something like that. This one is plastic with some kind of mesh woven in, so I wasn't quite sure how heat resistant is this thing. So usually you need to apply heat around there in order to cut the adhesive. So yeah, that was a bit weird. I mean, it did work out, but I had to be really careful. Maybe I didn't have to, but I tried to. So anyway, so that removed the back cover. Then I disassembled some parts of the mid-frame. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of screws here that I disconnected from there. So that's that. So we don't need this one, well, anytime soon, I think. Yeah, that's another part of the mid-frame, I suppose. Yeah, again, nothing super interesting in there. So that left us with, okay, that's the charging coil for the wireless charging. I probably should disconnect that. So again, the battery, it's a pretty big battery here. That's where I was able to cut it out. It was also glued down there. And that's the connector here. It goes right here. So yeah, that's the battery, and that's what I tried to successfully, I might add, charge externally. But when I put it back in, it still didn't work out somehow. Anyway, so that's the battery. We'll get back to that in a moment. And that's not part of the original design, so I'll get back to that in a second. So that's the main board, and here's the screen assembly. So I did connect it back. I did disconnect it at some point in time. Let me just show you. So there's just one flex connector here. Yep, right there. That connects the screen assembly with the main board, which is that, and that's what we have. So again, I tried to connect my micro USB charging cable. Again, nothing gets drawn. I mean, we can do that exercise very quickly again. Let's see. Nope. Like that. And like the charge analyzing, and again, there's nothing. That by itself is not super unusual. We'll need to connect the battery. Sure, let's connect battery first. Connect the battery connector. Like so. Yeah, that's the connector. Just pushes in. And we can still connect it to our charger. And as you can see, hopefully you can see, yeah, 0 amps, doesn't pull any power. Okay, so that's where I was. I mean, I knew that was the state even before I started disassembling it. So I decided to take a closer look at the main board here, as sort of the last attempt in a way. And because basically what I needed to figure out, if the issue is the charging port, are we not getting any power through, or something is broken on the main board itself. So the way I did that, often somewhere in the area near the charging port, you would see some pads. And let me show you an example of that. Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah, see? That's a pad, that's a pad. And then there are actually 2 pads here that I already soldered something into. That was not the state it was originally. There was just 2 pads exactly like that. So, what quite commonly these pads are connected to are either the 4, whatever, we have 4 or 5 pads like that, either the 4 or 5 traces from the USB connector, so that would be ground, power, and 2 data traces, data lines. Or actually I also have the battery connector here with 4 pins, 4 lines, and that's where it might be connected to as well. So that was my hypothesis, and that's what I wanted to test out. Now, then the next thing was I was very excited about trying to power it off, and that's the button right here. And again, we will see some power draw here. Yeah, see? And look at that. Just look at that. We're actually powering the device right now. And in fact, now, after I did all this operation, if actually when I'm not connecting to that, it will power off the battery, though that wasn't the case before. So I guess either there was some bad connection or anything, I'm not sure, but it should work off the battery alone by now. And again, it will boot, so we can wait for that. But everything seems to be working. The screen is working, the touch is working. There are some cracks there. Again, it would be really hard to see on the camera, I think. Yeah, like here. As you can see, there we go. I have a lot of stuff not connected, so no sound, well, most of the things. But again, like that's kind of important part. The device is clearly working. The screen is working. The touch is working. So something, most likely the charging port here is not quite working. So then I connect the micro. So again, like that's because I don't have the charging port itself right away easily available. I'd prefer to make sure that it's the port which is at fault here, and not something along the way, because again, as I said, that could be an issue with some kind of connection, a trace between the port and the rest of the bus. However, in order to test that, we'll need to have the breakout cable, like so. So again, that's just a normal micro USB cable cut in half, and then I solder it to the basically pin out the 4 cables inside. So I can actually test, well, whatever continuity or whatever I need to test without sticking the probes inside the port itself, because that's quite finicky. So that's a way better way of doing that. So we have an issue. So again, it's not the ground, it's the power line, and it's between this port. So it could be the port itself, and I know that the cable is fine. And there's something, and somewhere like the trace between the pad and the port, which is kind of unlikely. I don't see any obvious damage here. It doesn't have to be obvious, but usually there's something like a water damage or a crack that causes something like that. So the chances are it's the port. So again, the other way to test for that would be to try to get to the actual legs of the port soldered to the board and see where do we lose connection, continuity. Is it within the port itself, or it's somewhere in between, which would be unlikely. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, so I disconnected the flex cable finally for the flex coil. And I think I'll disconnect the screen right here. Yep, because we don't need that to test the power delivery and to work on that. So yeah, so that leaves us just with the main board. And yeah, this part on this side we don't see anything, it's all sealed. However, what we can, I don't know if we can see much here. Let's try. Right, so that's a very weird setup. Again, I don't know how much you can see, but yeah, like that. So basically these are, looks to be like a pins of the connector, or at least the legs. But normally that would just be soldered and that's it. But this one looked to be covered with some kind of, I think it's a masking compound, which is usually not how it's done here. I'm not sure if it's the factory how it's done. It's somebody actually repaired it and did it this way, which is kind of bad if that's what I'm thinking, because that will prevent us from desoldering. Not prevent, I mean, we'll need to clean that up, otherwise, well, that's not going to melt, and we'll have issues removing this component from here. Okay, so whether we are testing for continuity or we'll need to remove it, so we'll need to clean that up. And for that, I'm going to use my, I mean, there are different ways how to do that, but basically just to scrape it off. I have my fancy pen, which is just basically USB charged, and there's like a tiny burr in here. There are different ones, and if you press the button, yeah, it's a burr. So, but it's a tiny tip, and I should be able to get in there and scrape that masking. All right, let's try to do that. I doubt I'll be able to film much there. It's very fine, and there's no way to for me to put the camera in there. So I'll probably show you the end result. All right, so I did some testing, and unfortunately, as I suspected, the port is at fault here. So as you can see, let's see. Yeah, I cleaned up the epoxy or whatever it is, the masking compound here, so I uncovered all the 5 traces from the micro USB cable and was able to test continuity for them all the way through the cable, through the port, and 4 of them, so that means data plus minus, ID and the ground, go through quite fine, but of course our power line, the one on the left here, is not. And actually, after I take a closer look, and again, you probably won't be able to see anything in here, but yeah, the trace, or the pin rather, for the 5V is in there, but I think it's just smashed all the way back in there. I can find it with the probe. However, the actual plug, the USB plug, does not reach it, so there's no continuity on plus V line. So that means I will need to replace this port if I can. So first things first, desoldering, and then if I can find the replacement, we'll put a new one in. So let's get going. All right, so let's take a look at what we did here. And the parts here are way too small now, even to look at with the magnification of the camera. So I have to switch to my microscope. I mean, that's not the best quality microscope ever, practically a toy, but it will actually do fine here. So that's basically what we are left with after cleaning up the flux and the residue. It doesn't look too bad, well, with some exceptions. So the legs here are all, well, holes actually for the legs, all cleaned up, all straight through, so all ready for the installation of the new port. Now, the pads. Well, most of the pads arrived. There are 5 of them, as you can see. There's one. This pad is fine, this pad is fine, this pad is fine, this pad is slightly turn off probably, but like certainly way more than enough. Here, unfortunately, one pad is almost gone, and I will talk about this in a second. So let's actually zoom in just a little bit and see what we have here in more detail. Okay, so here we are. Here are our pads. So as I said, these pads do not look too bad, and we can see that there's no bridging. And again, I verify it with my multimeter. And I can show you. So that's our ground. Yeah, that's the sound of continuity. No continuity here. No continuity here, so all good. However, yeah, and as I said, so that's the pad for our the power line, 5 volts from the cable. That's the part that was actually, well, not that part, the connector part here didn't work. Unfortunately, we basically removed the whole pad here, which is actually one of the data lines. So it shouldn't impact charging, but the phone wouldn't be able to connect to the computer by USB. So that's not good. Having said that, well, the excuse here is, as I said, and I think I showed a little bit to the extent I could, this area was filled with some kind of adhesive, so it wasn't just soldered on. So it was pretty tough to clean it up. You don't want to clean too much, because otherwise you'll scrape the pads and potentially traces. If you don't strip it enough, if you don't remove the adhesive enough, which probably what happened here, then you would have to apply too much force when pulling it out, even though solder is liquefied, and then you're potentially pulling the pads. Anyway, so we want to fix that. So technically speaking, there is actually a connection here, which is just this tiny island here. Slightly, so let me just show you, because I know where it's supposed to go. So the trace actually will need to go, let me just see, where is my other probe to, right here. And you can hear there is a continuity there, but that's probably not quite enough. So we can try to solder to just this peak here, but that would be a pretty junky connection. So I'll probably run a jumper wire between these 2 points. So luckily I know what they're supposed to be connected to. And I checked the other pads. The other pad seems to be connected to the points of the main board. So that they should be fine as long as we solder the pins of the connector to the pads. Now, speaking of this pad, which is almost gone, as I said, outside of this one, so I thought I may try to actually dig out some more metal from the same trace, from the same pad, and I did it here, and you can see there's some metal showing up here. But that's actually not the one that was from the pad, so it seems to be that it's a multi-layer board. And this metal what I dig up here is actually connected to the ground, so that's not the one what we want. So let me just show you. Yeah, as you can hear, so that's the one on the left where I'm touching is the ground. And here we are connecting to that piece of metal, which is, yeah, that's not good. So I can show, yeah, if I touch here, there's no connection between the two because that's a different trace. So we have a little bit of a pickle here. I mean, not a huge deal, but that will require some precision work here. So I'll need to cover with the masking compound stuff that I'm actually not supposed to be exposing here. So like all this area will need to be masked because we definitely don't want to connect our data line to the ground here. That's not good. I'll probably fill in a little bit here. I'm not sure, that looks like a little bit of metal pieces here. I think it's all ground, but yeah, that wasn't here originally. It was some scratched up here. So I'll fill that in. And after that part is done, I will actually try to solder to this exposed piece a jumper wire. And whether that works or not, well, that doesn't really matter, because then when installing the connector, I will actually solder the wire to the leg of the connector itself. So then we'll have the straight up connection right here where it needs to go. And that will need to be masked as well. So that's the plan. Let's get to it. So as I said, first masking here, then curing with UV, then we'll try to attach the jumper wire here, and then when I get the connector, we'll install the connector here and see if it all worked out. So let's get to it. Well, if you want to see me struggle with making this jumper wire connection, go check out my worklog video, the link is in the description. But let's just say the struggle was real. And yeah, so that's the thin wire going from the jumper point here with the few blobs of the masking compound to hold it in place all the way to, yeah, as you can see, it's not attached to anything, but that's supposed to be soldered to the pin. Alright, and now the soldering is done. So here's our new port right here, including the jumper cable, jumper wire. Right, so okay, so let's assemble it back and see what we got. All right. Alright, so I did run the tests, and as you can see, it's on disassembled state, so not everything is great. Well, what is great is that our repair of the charging port worked perfectly, so no issues with charging, no issues with data connection. Again, the assembly of the wireless charging works just as well, so that's always good. But of course, there's still more things that are not completely perfect. So two of them actually in this case. One is microphone is not working again. So I don't know what's our luck with that. So similar thing with the LG G4 we had not a long time ago. So yeah, microphone is not working. And the second part is GPS does not seem to have any reception. So I mean the GPS itself, so the mobile network location still works, but not the GPS. So that's the two issues that we will try to investigate and maybe fix. So let's start with the GPS one, because it seems that, well, there's a relatively obvious thing that is happening here. And usually when you have a GPS working, or actually not working like that, when it's trying to locate satellites but it can't do like literally any signal, or it's extremely weak, the immediate suspect usually is antenna. Antennas in the smartphones are really weird. They're not like antennas of old from, you know, cars or, you know, radio receivers. They are strips of metal, usually embedded somewhere in the case. And yeah, if there's no connection or no good connection, then that's the kind of symptoms you're going to have. So unfortunately, I don't really have a schematics for the phone directly. However, we do have for most of the devices that actually transmit signals, electromagnetic signals, there would be some schematics posted on FCC website, which I could find this XT1254 model in there. And I can tell you that, remember, like this part of the mid-frame. So these are actually, okay, let's just zoom in. So these metal strips embedded here, this one, and this one, these are actually all antennas. So for different things. And in our case, we care about the GPS antenna, which happens to be this one. That's the one, and never mind the piece of wire here. That's already me starting to do some kind of repair here. So in the way it works, so these antennas are embedded here in the mid-frame piece. And if we flip it around, these are actually the pads where these antenna pieces connect to the rest of the main board. With something like this spring connection here. So there's similar pads on the other side. So let's look at the corresponding locations on the main board. And as you can see, there are two ones nearby. This one is GPS one. This one I think is a Bluetooth one. So there are two pads nearby. And that's how it goes. So that's a location here. So let's take a closer look and see what we see here. And lo and behold, okay, so here is our spring connector for the Bluetooth antenna. So it literally presses into this pad, and that's what makes a connection. But look here. That's where it's supposed to be exactly the same thing as this for the GPS. And this pad with the spring connector is completely ripped off. So, like, well, no wonder. And it seems that it also pulled a bit of the trace from the pad. And it seems to be connecting right about here. So we really need to be connecting the antenna to this pin. Now, for the microphone issues, unfortunately, unlike the G4, where we knew exactly where the microphone is, I don't really have a well, as I said, schematics or really a location where the microphone, which is a problem here, is located. And by the way, I determined that it's the regular microphone is a problem. If I actually connect external microphone with the headset via the where is our, yeah, I don't know where is our, anyway, via the regular plug externally, that's everything works, voice recording and things like that. So there are lots of things like this you can see here that actually look like, and that's just a rubber silicone cover. So let's just take it out and you'll see what I'm talking about. Right, this looks exactly like a microphone. It's slightly different than the one what we had on G4, because in G4 the hole would be on the inner side and that would go through the hole in the board to the other side. Here it's actually on the top, on the other side of the pads. And but apart from that, that's really how the SMD microphones look like, at least some types of them. Unfortunately, you would think that that's the one what we care about. Well, there's a whole bunch of them just like looking like that. There's underneath this one, the red covers, the two there, and then there's one with the green one here. So I'm not sure what they are for. If I knew exactly what they are for, and potentially some of them might not be useful or useful enough, I could desolder some of these and put them in different spot. But the point is, like, I don't know, and I didn't really find any good information on that. So let's get started, and we'll start with the GPS part. So let's get going. Okay, so switching to the microphone repair attempt. So that's my replacement microphone strapped with a Kapton tape. That's again high temperature adhesive tape because it's so small. Again, it sticks to the soldering tip, to everything else. It's really hard to solder something to that component if you can't hold it. Alright, so despite my best effort on fixing the microphone, given the information I had, which was not much, and Frankenstein in this, let's see if we can get a closer look. Yeah, as you can see, that's the microphone what I had from G4, and it's connected the jumper wires to the pads right about there. Unfortunately, that did not fix the microphone problem, so the microphone is still not functioning, the internal one, and the external one is still working. If you have it on the headset and connected to via the plug. The good news that our pad repair for the, let's see here, yeah, we created another pad, connected it to where it's supposed to go for the GPS antenna to where it's supposed to go. That actually worked. So the thing is that what I'm planning to do right now is I contemplated just soldering the, again, another jumper wire from the pad to the mid frame where the antenna is. But that would basically makes it hard to disassemble. And if you're not careful, you will likely rip something out, either the new pad, additional trace, or something else. So I'll probably avoid that, and I've done it before. I'll just stuff a bit of foil, copper or aluminum, we'll see, in between here, instead of this spring connector, which is basically the same thing. And it will clamp it with the screws here for the mid frame. That should work fine. Alright, so I just soldered the attempt to the replacement microphone. And now, let me show you what I have here. It's really small, but yeah. So basically what we have here is a piece of copper foil, just rolled. You can see, so it has several layers. And that's basically to simulate our spring contact there. And that's the part what I'm going to stuff right here, between here and the mid frame. I'm going to be in there, and that will create a connection between the pad here and the pad on this side of the mid frame. And that should work. So let's do that. like so. And basically, yeah, you can see. Yeah, so that's our GPS antenna, and that's the other side of that, and that's our plug made of copper, and it should create a solid connection with the pad down there, and that should make the GPS antenna work. All right. All right, so it's all finally assembled, and let's take a closer look, hopefully final look at this device. So as I mentioned in the beginning, it's Motorola XT1254 with that actual brand name, I guess, for that would be Droid Turbo. So Motorola Droid Turbo, and we've got it and had no power because the connector was completely broken. And we replaced that, so that part is working. Okay, so that we fixed, and then we managed to find more issues with this device, namely the GPS was not working, and that we could trace to the ripped pad on the antenna connector, which we, well, J-rigged the connection, and I will show you in a second that part is fixed, that worked. Unfortunately, there was another issue, which is the internal microphone that was supposed to be working, and it wasn't again completely. And that I tried to do an attempt to repair that because I didn't really have any information about the locations and the types of microphones that we were supposed to be using in this phone. That did not work. I made an attempt and it didn't work. I'll show you that as well. And that's basically it. So most of the things on this phone now work, with the exception of the internal microphone. Let's say internal microphone, meaning that if I actually connect, I don't have it handy here, but if I connect the headphones with the headset via the jack here, the microphone on the headset would work fine. And apart from that, what else? There's some, probably would be almost impossible to see on camera, but there's a screen protector, and it seems like the glass on the screen itself might be cracked or like micro cracked. It doesn't impact the screen. It's really almost impossible to see. I'm pretty sure impossible to see it on the camera. And no touch is affected, but it is kind of there. Again, if you know how to look at that, so not really a big deal, but obviously not in tip-top condition. And the internal microphone. Everything else seems to be fine. So okay, let's check our GPS now. Okay, so we're on our GPS program, and look, it started to connect to the satellites right away, and previously it would just sit there looking at these red dots, meaning no connection to satellites. Yeah, it's working, it's on now. Yeah, no issues with GPS now at all. As far as the microphone, unfortunately, yeah, as you can see, here we have the sound meter, which measures some like basic level. Unfortunately, it doesn't really measure anything. So you can demonstrate this. So if I clapping is actually pretty loud, even though very short. So you should see really high spikes here. And nothing is happening. It just basically measures some noise here at the low level, and yeah, has no impact on the actual sound level. That's unfortunate. And let's see the charging part. Okay, so here's the battery stuff. No, not the battery. Okay, yeah, right now battery is, well, kind of fully charged and is discharging because it's not connected. So let's connect that. This way, I suppose. Look, Charging an IC. It's charging, so all looking good. Again, I tried it before. It's already charged to full from not full on using this connector. And I did try it with the data connection. That works fine as well. So the charging port is fixed. The GPS antenna is, well, fixed to the extent we could. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's certainly working just fine if you don't disassemble or reassemble it multiple times. And the internal microphone is not working. So that is the bottom line for this phone. Any final words here? Let's look at our dev check. Right, so like 4 cores, 2560 by 1440 screen, so that's pretty good. 32 gig memory and Android 6, so it looks pretty similar to the LG G4 we had, even though the G4 had 6 cores. I think apart from that, very similar device. Again, if somehow you don't need the internal microphone, either you don't want to use it as a phone and just like as a media device, or you use the external headset with a microphone, that phone is perfectly fine. And yeah, so one other thing is, like, if anybody knows specifically for this phone, XT1254 Motorola's, where is this external microphone and ideally the part number, but again, that's less important. Please let me know in the comments. Would love to revisit if I still have this phone and fix this last piece. But apart from that, hey, you know that for $1, I think it's still good value even without that. Of course, it's $1 plus quite a bit of work what we put in there. Well, plus the cost of the port, but that's just a few cents. And that's that. So hopefully you enjoyed the content. Again, let me know in the comments if you have any additional information regarding this issue. And I'll see you in the next episodes. So see you then.